Hey everybody, Jeremiah Clark, Product Director for Lowrance Electronics. First of all, I wanted to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're going to walk you through, Lowrance product expert Jacob Scott is going to give us a walkthrough on how to install the ActiveTarget Live Sonar system. He's going to show us the, what's in the box, where everything mounts up, and give us some tips and tricks on getting this installed. After we show that video, we're going to cut back to me live. We're going to do some live Q&A, so if you have questions, go ahead and fire those into the chat. We have a moderator standing by that's going to get a list of those and feed them to me. After we do that first live Q&A session, we're going to cut back to one more video of Jacob on the water showing you the fruits of his labor and how well this install works for tracking some different types of baits. And then we'll kind of come back for one more last round of Q&A and wrap up. So join us now for this live video on the water of Jacob doing this install.
Hey everybody, Jacob Scott, Lowrance product expert, and today we're going to do an install video for the highly coveted ActiveTarget. As you can see, I've got laid out in front of me everything that comes in the box. So let's talk a little bit about what we have here. First off, we have your transducer with a 25-foot cable. Next, we have the black box, the brains, the module, one of the most important things in the box besides the transducer. Next, we have a power cable, 15-foot Ethernet cable. Then we have all of the mounts. It doesn't matter if you have a shaft mount trolling motor or if you have an electric steer that requires you to mount it to the head of the trolling motor. We've got your shaft mount here. And the great thing about this mount is it gives you all three positions, forward, down, and scout mode, and it doesn't require any tools to change it. Just a quick twist of this knob, and these knobs are the same knobs that we use on the units. So should you ever lose a knob, they're real easy to find. We have your side mount for an electric steer trolling motor and the hose clamp to hold it on. We have the scout mode clamp. We've got a couple of bolts that will be required. This little brown package here, this is your mounting hardware to mount your box wherever you put it inside the boat. And then we also have an install manual. So once you open the box, this is everything that's in there. Once you get it out and laid out, the next thing we're going to do is start installing it on a boat. All right, first thing we want to do is talk a little bit about the connectivity on the unit, what has to be connected to where to make everything function properly. So as we look at our little black box here, we can see we have the sonar connection, the Ethernet connection, and the power connection. Pretty explanatory. You have to have the power cable plugged in to get power. You have to have the transducer plugged in to get the signal. And then you have to have the Ethernet plugged in to get the signal from the box to your displays, be it an HDS Live, an HDS Carbon, or an Elite FS. So with that in mind, we're going to figure out where we want to place this box on the boat. All right, the second thing we're going to have to do is figure out where we want to mount this module. You can choose a lot of different spots on the boat. Some anglers want to put it up here under this front hatch, and that's really dependent on if you have enough room. As you can see, if we pulled this stuff out here, we wouldn't have a whole lot of room to access underneath here to be able to put the module there. Because if you look at the size of it, it's almost the size of everything that's up here. So we're going to look back in the rod locker next. That's another great spot to be able to put these. And with 25 feet of transducer cable and a 15-foot Ethernet cable, you can put this virtually anywhere on your boat. Now that we're getting ready to mount the module, the front of the boat, that opening's a little too small to be able to put that module in there and get it situated how we want it and secured. So a lot of anglers, especially on bass boats, they'll wind up using a rod locker. Now a lot of people think, hey, you're taking up rod locker space, you can't put rods in there. Well, a lot of the anglers, this rod locker right in front of the driver's console becomes more or less a junk locker. It has things like life jackets, ropes, paddles, lights, things like that in it. So as you can see, this is everything that we pulled out, toolbox, so a lot of this stuff winds up in this locker right in front of the driver's console. So that makes it a really good spot to be able to go in here and find a spot where we want to mount this black box for the ActiveTarget transducer. So now that we've got everything pulled out of here, we're going to go ahead and start working on getting this module mounted inside this box. Since we've decided on putting it in the rod locker, we also have another choice as far as this rod locker goes, where we want to mount the module. So we're going to mount it on this inside wall, but the question becomes, do I mount it really far forward or all the way to the back? As you can see, if I were to come to this back wall, I've already got a sonic hub and the vessel view link for the Mercury in here. So looking in here, I feel like the best thing to do is kind of split the difference, because if I go all the way up, I need to make sure I've got a good spot to run power. If I come partially up, I know I've got enough power cable that I can get back underneath my console and wire it into a good spot there. So we're going to wind up mounting this. Looking in here, if you can see, I'm going to come about halfway up the wall of this rod locker. So I feel like this is going to be the best spot where I'm still going to have enough room to get underneath the console with my power cable and then not have a whole lot of issues running things from the front of the boat to this position. I'm going to get my screw located in here. There's one screw in. Is it still recording?
No, it just stopped.
I was going to say when I heard it say stop in my ear. Got one in. Let's get number 2 put in here. All right. 3 and 4 are going to be down low. Okay, so number 4 is in. You can see our module's pretty solid right here. I'm happy with that location. Now that we have our module mounted in place, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move to the front of the boat. We're going to open the hatch up there. Then we're going to run our transducer cable and our Ethernet cable from the bow of the boat back to the module. Okay, so on our front hatch, I pulled the screws out. We're going to open this plate up. I'm going to kind of just move it out of the way. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of get things set up, and we're going to run a set of fish sticks through here, and we're going to pull the transducer cable and the Ethernet cable to the back of the boat. All right, I've got the front opened up here. I'm going to go ahead and run these fish sticks through here. Let me figure out if I got a tube I need to hit real quick. I don't feel anything specific. Feels like the lines just run through there. So I'm going to go ahead and run these fish sticks. Take a little bit to get them to hit that curve. Once I get that curve, feed these through here. That should be enough room to come out over there in my rod locker. All right, I've got this pushed through. I can see it in my rod locker. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get the transducer mounted up on the trolling motor. Then we're going to go ahead and tape our transducer cable and our Ethernet cable to my fish stick, and we're going to pull it through to the rod locker, get everything hooked up, and then we're going to go to the water and play with it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get our shaft mount mounted on the trolling motor. So this design is really awesome. We love it. When you want to change positions, instead of having to get tools out, all you have to do is loosen this knob, which if you're used to using Lowrance, that knob looks very familiar. So we're going to go ahead and get this adjusted. So if we look at the mount right here, if you can see how it kind of points down a little bit where it connects to the transducer, you want that part facing down, and it's going to be on the front of the shaft like this. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pulled apart. You can see it's facing down. This is kind of basically in scout mode right now, but once we get it on, we'll get it set into position. So where do I need to put this on the trolling motor? It depends on how deep you have your trolling motor in the water. On this one's a 47-inch, and typically about 6 inches above, so right in here. If you don't have a tape measure, a good indicator that you got with you for 6 inches, a dollar bill is about 6 inches long. So if you needed something that you wanted to measure with or just check it really quick, a dollar bill is a great tool for doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these screws pulled out of here, and we're going to get this started mounting on the trolling motor. Sometimes if you can leave one screw in place, it makes it a little bit easier. This time it's not going to work for me. I'm going to have to pull everything out. Set that right there. Again, make sure you don't lose these little pads because these help it grip onto the shaft. So as you can see, 6 inches about there. Make sure that is facing down. Bring this part back. All right, so now that I've got that on my shaft, I'm gonna kind of come around here. I wanna look at things, make sure I've got it lined up pretty level. So as I'm looking down, this looks like it's pretty much in the middle of the head of the trolling motor. Then when I look down the top here, this looks like it's pretty much on a straight line there. So now that we've got those on there, we're going to tighten them up a little bit more. The important thing to remember as you're tightening these on the shaft mount, you don't want to torque them super tight. If you torque them super tight, you can do something like possibly break or crack the plastic here, strip out the inserts. So, you know, like I said, finger tight, a little over finger tight. You don't want to crank on it. And then as you can see, if I give this a pretty good pull, it's not moving. So at that point, I feel like I'm good. I don't want to tighten this anymore. So when we talk about the ability to change this quickly, that's how quickly I went from the position where it looks at either forward or down or scout mode. So again, real quick, real easy. We're going to go ahead and put this back in the position for forward and down. The other thing that's important to remember when you're putting this on here, you want to have your trolling motor laying in the position how you stow it on the boat. Some guys like to stow it prop in, some anglers like to stow it prop out. So typically I stow mine prop in, as you can see here. So I also want to make sure that my transducer is going to be sitting on, this is going to be the starboard side, because if I were to stow this, have this where it was on the other side, when I went to stow it, it's going to smash into my rails here on the trolling motor mount, and that would be a bad thing. So again, always make sure that you've got your trolling motor in the position that you normally stow it before you start mounting this. Okay, we have the ActiveTarget mount mounted on the shaft. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our transducer in place. So the really important thing to remember here is the cable on the transducer. It's always going to be towards the back. So when you're in forward position, when you're in down position. There's been some people that have mounted it like this. This is improper. So the important thing to remember is your cable should pretty much line up with the shaft of the trolling motor when it's on the mount. Now, one of the other awesome things we talk about is the ability to quickly change this. Again, we talk about it uses the same knob as our gimbal mounts. So you see that right there, how quickly that attached? Now if I want to go and change that, that's in down mode. I just loosen this, 1, 2 clicks. That's all it takes to be in forward mode. So again, quick and easy to change, something we really like. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stretch out this transducer cable. The reason I do that is, as you can see, if I just kind of let it fall apart like that, we get all these curly cues in here, and those curly cues get tangled up and make it hard to pull through the tube. So we're going to stretch out the cable, get it straight, and then we're ready to pull it through the tubes. So the next thing we do before we start pulling it through is I want to get my cable laid on my trolling motor. So I've got it laid up here. I'm going to go ahead and take a zip tie. I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to pull it down just a little bit, but I'm going to not snug it up too tight yet, because the next thing I want to do is make sure that I have the extra cable I need to move back and forth between the modes. If we look on the back here, you can see this little notch on the top of the transducer. That's its indicator. You can see these 2 notches on the mount. So this back one is forward mode. 2 clicks right there puts you in down mode. So 2 clicks back is forward, 2 clicks to the top puts you in down mode. Then the next thing you want to do is you loosen the knob that's right there on the mount for the shaft. When you tighten that back up, now we're in scout mode. So as you can see, we've gone through all 3 modes that we can put it in, and I do have enough transducer cable out here to do that without causing any binds. So now we're going to go ahead and tighten these cables up a little bit. We're not going to get them too super tight, but we're going to get them tight enough. I usually use a set of pliers to get a good hold on it. We're going to go ahead and swap back to what's going to be our forward mode. A little tension there. Another zip tie here. Give it a little tug. So now the next thing we need to do with our next zip tie and our cable is, as we come up here, we're going to leave a little loop in this, about like that. And what that does is that gives us enough cable when we rotate this trolling motor that we don't bind up our cable. So we have enough cable to spin to 360 degrees. I mean, it doesn't do a full 360, it does it in the increments. But we have to have the cable there to allow it to turn around the shaft. So we'll go ahead and get this zip tied on here. Again, I use my needle noses so I can get a good grip on that. We'll put one more down here on the shaft. The other thing to remember is, if you're going to be lifting your shaft up and down, sliding it up and down, you need to make sure that you leave yourself a little bit of space. So I've given myself probably about 2 or 3 inches of adjustment here. Typically I don't need to do a whole lot more up and down on it than that. So we'll go ahead And again, we talk about straightening that cable to help prevent these little curly cues we see. Gonna leave a little bit in it like that for as we stow and deploy. Just kind of gives me a nice cleaner look up here. Now, I use a set of flush mount cutters, and the reason I do this is when I use these to cut the tag of my zip ties off, I actually get a little flush cut right with the locking device on the zip tie. Now, a lot of you guys have probably used just regular wire cutters. You get that little sharp piece left there that will slice you open. So again, I love these just for the fact that it makes a nice flush cut and doesn't leave something to lay me open. All right, now we're ready to run our transducer cable into the rod box. So we're gonna get it inside. We're gonna run it through the grommet that's right here. That way I don't have to try to force it in one of these cutouts where I've got other cables running through. So it'll go in nice and clean. So we're gonna run the cable through the grommet, then we'll attach it to our fish stick, and we'll pull our transducer and our Ethernet back into the rod box where the module is. Okay. All right, now that our transducer cable is pulled through the grommet, it is attached to the trolling motor, zip tied along the shaft and the cable. The next thing we need to do is get it back into the rod locker to connect to the module. So I'm going to tape it up on my fish tape, or my fish stick actually. I've been asked before, why do I use these fish sticks instead of a fish tape? And the main reason is I just really like the fact that it's a solid fiberglass stick. It's more rigid. It makes it a lot easier to feed it through, whereas the fish tapes, being a flexible metal like they are, they're not always rigid and they don't always push through how you'd like them to. So I've got my Ethernet cable here, got my transducer taped on to the fish stick. Now I'm going to lay my Ethernet cable in here and get it taped on as well. All right, that's taped down, and there we go. So now we're going to get these fed through and pulled into the rod locker. So I've got them fed through. Pull these fish sticks. Now as I pull them out, it took me about 3 links to get back here where I need to be. I'm going to pull those out and undo them. So now I have my cable for the transducer and the Ethernet. So let me pop this tape off of here real quick. Let me continue. All right, there's all of my Ethernet. And there is all of my transducer cable. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is power cables. They're really important because without them, your unit wouldn't function. So this is the power cable for the ActiveTarget module. It's a 4-pin cable. You only have to worry about 3 of the wires that are on here. The red's your power, the black's your ground, and the yellow is your wake-up wire. This blue guy, he's not important for these modules, so you don't have to worry about him. Most of your cables that you're used to seeing, they may have, this is your standard cable that plugs into your HDSs, your Elite FS, your Elite TIs, all of those. This plugs into pretty much everything except for hook 2 and hook reveal. If you look at it, it's got these 3 wires that are the important wires. Red, yellow, and black. Red positive, black's your ground, and then you hook this yellow wire to this yellow wire. And what this does is it gives the unit the ability, when you turn it on, it says, hey, wake up, I need you to go to work, to the ActiveTarget module. And it's also the same with our Structure Scan 3D or any other module that you have connected up. You need this little yellow wake up wire to work. Now this power cable I just took out of one of our Elite FS boxes, and as you can see, it only has a red and a black. So before you guys call customer service and say I got the wrong power cable, if you look right here, you can see right there that yellow wire is right there at the bottom of that. So all you have to do to get to that yellow wire to connect it to this yellow wire is take some wire strippers, strip a little bit of this shielding back, and that will expose the yellow wire, and it will then look like this. So now that you guys know the basics of hooking those up, there's another way that you can hook these up. And this is what I do on my boat, because I have a master power switch on my boat that turns everything on and everything off. So instead of having to make sure I've got this yellow wire connected to each other, I connect my yellow wire and my red wire together. With those connected together, anytime power is applied to the boat, it sees the power and it wakes the module up. Now, like I said, I do that just because I've got a master kill switch on my boat, so I just turn everything on and off like that. A lot of anglers like to put this on, depending on what model of boat they have accessory switches at the dash. So a lot of anglers will connect these two together and then put these on an accessory switch on the dash so they can turn that module on and off whenever they want to. So again, just a couple of different options on how you can connect all of these wires. Power is connected. Sonar or transducers mounted, cable pulled through. We're going to go ahead and plug this into the box. Now another thing that's important to remember is when you're plugging these transducers into the box and into your MFDs, you do not want to hot swap the transducer. And what hot swapping essentially is if you have power to your display unit or your module box like this and plug the transducer in there, with the power already going on, it can cause damage to the transducer. So it's always best to make sure there is no power when you're plugging transducers in or unplugging them. So we're going to get these all plugged in. Now, all of these have orientation pins on them, which is like these little notches that you see right here. So it's important to get those lined up. And when you're trying to line those up, you don't want to really cram a whole lot of pressure on it. You just want to kind of gently be pushing on it until it locks into place like that. Now, as that went in, you can see my lights have come on the unit. There's going to be a light for power, a light for the Ethernet, and a light showing that you're connected. So you're going to have a solid green light while the module is booting up. Once it's booted up, it'll start flashing between a green and like a reddish amber colored light. So as you can see how it's doing that right there, between the green and that kind of red color. When we have activity on the Ethernet, which means this unit's talking to another unit, this light will start flashing. And then if you don't have a light here on your sonar, then you don't have, it's not seeing the transducer. So either make sure you're plugged in properly, make sure you haven't bent any pins when plugging it in, and then if you still don't get any lights, then you might have an issue with your transducer. Then you'd need to call customer service. So everything appears to be working on this. So now that I have all these cables connected up, we know that everything works. I'm gonna clean these cables up, make some really nice loops, put some zip ties on them. We're gonna tuck everything up in there so it's nice and neat, and we're gonna go to the water.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you've been enjoying watching Jacob install this product, going through some of the tips and tricks, some basic install stuff. We've seen a few questions pop up a bunch of times that we've answered, but I'll go ahead and answer some of them live here. Getting a lot of questions about the yellow wire. The yellow wire is a software fix that's coming soon. It will, right now, it turns the box on but doesn't turn the box off. So we will have a software fix coming in the very near future to correct that. If you need your box powered off, you can do a couple things. One, if you have a master shutoff switch to the whole boat, you can turn that off when you're done. Or if you wired the red and yellow wire together to a switch itself, you can use that to turn it off. But we do have a fix in progress and should have it out any minute. There was also some people asking questions about zip ties. Our official stance on that is you can use zip ties as long as they're not cranked down too tight. Most people, when they get zip ties, they crank them way down. That is a problem because then you don't allow the cable to move. But really, as long as you have enough flexibility or enough slack in there so the cable can move a little bit, and also enough loop so the motor can turn without yanking on that cable, you'll be okay. If you're more comfortable using electrical tape on the shaft or using something else, that's fine. The key is just don't crank it down so tight that it can't move and can't flex, because as the lower unit turns, you will need some slack and some play in that system as well. I do have, if I've got my earpiece in now, I've got one of our moderators going to feed me some questions that we've been seeing. So if you see me pause for a second, I haven't blacked out on you or anything. I'm just listening to the question. So let's go ahead and go to the first question. So he's asking what MFD means. MFD means multi-function display. That's just an industry term that we often use instead of saying HDS Live or Elite FS. Yeah, so the question about compatibility, we get this a lot. This is compatible with HDS Live, HDS Carbon, and Elite FS. Those are the only products we have that are running new enough, basically platforms, processors, and software that can handle this live imagery. Some people ask about the recent hooks. The hooks do not have Ethernet, so there's no way that a hook could actually connect to this box. As Jacob showed in his video, we actually send the data to the display, to the MFD, via this Ethernet port. If your box doesn't have one of those, we can't talk to it. So just it's just really 3 units. We do HDS Live, HDS Carbon, and Elite FS. Does it interfere with Active Imaging 3-in-1? You can get a little bit of what people see as flashes on the screen, but it's not what I would consider traditional sonar interference where your screen is unusable or there's noise or flashes all over the entire screen. You do occasionally see an intermittent pulse from the transmit of the side scan, but it's something that I don't personally really even notice when I'm on the water. So how to align the direction indicator? So the direction indicator works one of 2 ways. Out of the box, we use course over ground. So if the boat's moving, the direction indicator can tell the direction that the transducer's facing versus the direction that the boat's moving. If the boat's sitting very still, we don't have that course over ground. Course over ground is the GPS telling the display, I was here, now I'm here, I must have gone this direction. If you're really kind of drifting slowly or sitting still and you don't have a heading sensor on the boat, we have no way of knowing what direction you're actually moving. So one way around that is if you do a lot of fishing at anchor or sitting still or slow drift, is if you have a 0.1 on the boat, we can use that to determine the heading, and then we can know the difference of the actual boat heading versus the transducer heading. Why is there a ground screw on the module and do you need to connect it? The ground screw on the module is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to ground the box, which helps get rid of any potential for electrical interference. If you have it in an install and you're not seeing a lot of electrical interference or outside noise, you probably don't have to use it. In my installations, I've actually usually go ahead and hook that up just for the extra added insurance of a good clean system with no interference. So the system is up and running, but the box and transducer get warm and wanting to know if it's normal. The box of ActiveTarget is actually made of aluminum, and it's designed to be what we call a heat sink. This is designed to take all that heat away from the processor. So on your laptop computer, you have a big fan that blows hot air on your lap when you're using it. Since these are in a marine environment, we can't obviously put a fan in there and open this up to the elements. So the way you get heat out is through this big metal box. If anybody was around back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and played with car audio, it's the same kind of as those amplifiers that they use there, right? You need a way of getting the heat out. So the box is probably, being warm is very normal. Again, it's an aluminum housing and it's designed to get the heat off. That's what these fins are for. Does ActiveTarget require a 0.1? No, ActiveTarget does not require a 0.1. However, it goes back to that conversation of using coarse over ground for your on-screen transducer indicator versus using actual vessel heading for that. Vessel heading is always going to be more accurate and will work when you're stationary or at very low speeds. Where coarse over ground, you really need to be moving for it to be accurate. Okay, how do we mount ActiveTarget to an electric steer motor? So there's two different mounts in the box, actually 3 full mounts in the box. So in the video you saw Jacob install the shaft mount. Well, on an electric steer you can't use a shaft mount because the shaft actually goes up through the front of the motor and actually stores. So this would hit, you can't use it. So what we have is actually 2 separate mounts depending on the view you want. We have this mount here, which is the mount on the side. So if you imagine that my arm is the lower unit of an electric steer motor, this would mount like this, and it allows you to put the transducer on to either the down or to the forward orientation while mounted to the side of the motor. If you wanted to use the scout mode, you actually mount one to the top of the motor and then the transducer sits on it like that. What was the next one, Matthew? So yeah, running the cable up on the shaft on the electric steer is very similar to the running the cable up a shaft on a cable steer, except for you do typically need to leave a little bit more slack in there because those motors can turn more than 360 usually. I've seen people using things like air hose, cut an air hose up and put the transducer cable in there, those coiled up hoses. There are aftermarket products you can buy to run the cable, route the cable that way to help give it a little bit of extra kind of distance to travel without having a big loop there. But really, it's not all that dissimilar from what Jacob showed for that for the Ghost, except for you need to leave a little bit more play to account for those motors that go more than 360 in a spin. Okay, that's a long question. I'll try to sum it up. Basically, if you've installed this in the garage and you're wanting to see is it working before you go to the lake, you're not going to see like a sonar lock like you might if you take like a regular transducer and ping it off concrete. But what you will see to know that this system is active is first the lights on the box. You can have the sonar light, the power light, the Ethernet light. Those should all be illuminated, and the power light should be flashing red, green to let you know that it's pinging the transducer. The other thing you'll see is in the very top of the screen, you can see almost like little bursts where it's trying to ping on something, but it won't actually get a lock. So you'll see that it's active. You shouldn't have a blank screen. You should basically have this little top corner trying to light up. Yeah, so the menu options. So I've been asked a question about menu options. One thing we did on this product, we tried to be very cognizant of not making it complex to use. We wanted it to be, take it out of the box, hook it up and go. So depending on the mode you're in, you'll see there's not really a ton of options. So in down, you have down range, you have contrast, you have noise rejection. Range is exactly what it sounds like. You know, if you want to set it to a certain depth, you can use auto range, or if you're going to fish in 30 feet of water and you want it to stay there, that's your range, just like it is in sonar. Contrast is how bright images are. Some people like, if you turn the contrast up, may wash out the detail of the bottom, but may pick these smaller fish up better. Kind of depends on what you're looking for there. If you want to see the smaller fish or if you want to see more detail on if you go up or down on the contrast. Noise rejection, a lot of people actually say run this off unless you're actually having noise problems. I usually run off or low depending on the kind of what I'm trying to see that day, but a lot of people will actually turn off with the contrast up a little bit to make these little tiny small targets pop out even more. And then more options, you go in there, you actually have the ability to change the color palette, put a range grid on. We have what we call stable view, which is our motion compensation. And then you can actually flip view. So if you have this installed in the down orientation, and forward is back and back is forward, you just toggle that and it flips it around for you. The menu options don't change too much more when you go to something like forward, but now the one thing you do see is now I have a forward range and a down range. So I can adjust this range and I can adjust this range. In Scout, you go back to just having just a range because there's no depth adjustment. So forward's the only one with 2 actual variables to adjust up and down and in and out. But again, we just designed it to be super simple, basic, easy to use. Really don't have to tinker too much with the menu. So if the yellow wire fix is a software update, how do you do it? It's going to be just like updating any other sonar module we've had. We'll have the software on our website. You put that software on a card. You go into the files menu of your HDS or your Elite FS. You pick that card, which the only card I have in here right now is a mapping card, but there would be a file on there called RIW. You touch that and it'll pull up a whole menu to basically run the update for you. Performance in saltwater. So it actually does work very well in saltwater. The one thing we've noticed is that you don't get quite the depths you do in freshwater. So in freshwater, we have a max range and distance of about 200 feet. In saltwater, that's about 100 to 120 feet. Just because the density of the water, the salinity of the water, the signal doesn't travel as well through that. But it is phenomenal for wreck, reef fishing, for those kind of things. And we've gotten to play with it a little bit. Not a whole lot, obviously, since we can't travel too much, but we've gotten to see it once or twice, and it is great in saltwater. All right, so that's the last question of this session. Again, I'll be back after the next video. We're going to do a quick little video of Jacob on the water showing tracking some lures and how to use, and then we'll come right back here.
All right, now that we've got everything installed, we're out on the water. Wind's kind of picked up and it's cooled off a little bit, but we're going to take you through this. So with your HDS, your carbons, your lives, or your Elite FSs, the first thing you want to check and make sure is you're going to hit the settings button, come down to the about screen. To run the ActiveTarget, you need to make sure your version right there is 20.1. Now there's a version out that's 20.0.1. That is not correct. If you have that on your unit, you will not see your ActiveTarget. So make sure you've got 20.1 on your unit, then you're ready to use it. It'll pop up on the screen. It'll tell you that the ActiveTarget features have been enabled. As you can see, we've got it on our screen right here. So when I hit that, you can see we're in forward mode right now. You can change your modes right here from forward to scout to down and also auto. Typically I don't use auto, and what it does is whichever position you put the transducer in, it should automatically know where you're looking at. I don't use that. I like to just keep it pretty straight, simple forward. So you can see our forward range. This is what you set to tell it how far out in front of you want to look. Your down range can be set in auto. In all honesty, I like to have mine manually. That way I can control where I see the bottom at. So if it's in auto range and say you move out a little bit and it's right there on the cusp of where we change, then if you change from 40 to 60 feet and you're still in just like right around 40 feet of water, you're gonna have a lot of blank screen beneath your bottom. So I like to do that manually. That way I know where my bottom is. So this is an A-rig. 5 swim baits, makes a nice big target. So now I'm searching a little bit. There it is. Right there about 40, 50 feet. We're about 40 feet now. See me popping it up and down. Right there, back at 20 now. Look how that just lights up on the screen. Now again, it's a nice big bait. Everybody goes, oh wow, big baits. Of course you can see those. All right, so now we're gonna change it up a little bit. We're gonna go from this nice, really big A-rig. We're gonna change, and we're gonna grab a swim bait. Basically a single, one of what we were just throwing. There it is, 50 feet. See me popping it up and down. $40, $30. So again, just a single swim bait, not a giant A-rig, easily picking it up out there at 50 feet. So we started with a really big A-rig. We went down to a single swim bait. Now we're gonna go down to this little itty bitty 1/16 of an ounce crappie bait. So we're dropping this guy down, a little bitty guy. See him drifting right there in front. Look right here. See that little guy right there at 10 feet? See him dropping down? That is that little bitty, see, let me pick him up right there, popped him up. That is that little bitty 1/16 of an ounce jig head for crappie. Dragging that all the way down, we're almost at the bottom. Look at that, 30 feet down there. You can see him. Now I'm gonna show you how easy it is to put this in the different modes. Let's go ahead and pop this up, and we're actually gonna go to scout mode, because that's the biggest change you're gonna have to make. And just a couple of quick adjustments here. I loosen this knob that's on the shaft mount, turn it into position, loosen the knob on the bottom of the transducer. Couple clicks and it's in position. Let's go ahead and get in scout mode on the unit. Make sure your orange box is around your active target screen, and in mode here, I hit from forward to scout. And now I'm in scout mode. As you can see, we're looking at this flooded timber that's back here. I'm kind of turning back in towards it. Now what this is great for is it gives you the ability, if you're kind of looking for something specific, or a lot of times you can see these fish that school up around these trees. So this is a great tool for being able to search for maybe those schooling fish that you're looking for, or if you're looking for a brush pile or a certain piece of structure out there. We're gonna go back to forward, I think, here, because we see where these fish are at in here. So we're gonna swap back to forward and go in here and see if we can catch something. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my ghost up. So again, I just loosened my shaft mount here. Turn it into the position it needs to be in. Tighten that back down. And again, since we use these knobs, there's no tools required on the boat. To go back to forward mode from scout mode, boom. Trolling motor back in the water, and we're back to fishing. There you have it. That's how easy it is to install your active target on the boat. The most important things to remember when you're installing it is to make sure you have your red and your yellow wires connected so that it can start up. Again, it can be connected to the yellow wire, or you can put it on a switch with the red and yellow together. And then once you get out on the water, how easy it is to swap between those three modes. Scout, down and forward. It's just a couple of clicks on the mount, no tools required. Get you out here on the water, get you fishing quickly, and it helps you find them. Don't forget, guys, if you like this video, continue to join our Lowrance YouTube channel, where you can get our tips and tricks and other helpful install videos.
Hey, still getting a few questions also on some of the angles. I know you guys were just watching Jacob and go through those adjustments on his shaft mount. And one thing we've seen some people do that really doesn't add a lot of benefit is, so this is basically where you sit when you're in down, that angle right there. And then you loosen the knob, it's 2 clicks, you can feel 2 clicks. That's forward. It really doesn't look drastically different, but each one of those clicks is changing the transducer by about 12, 13 degrees. So really by doing that, you're moving the viewpoint quite a bit. One thing we've seen a lot of people do though, is they will try to crank this thing up like this, thinking it's gonna get them a bit more looking further out. And the reason we don't recommend this at all is basically what you see here on the screen, is that when we show the screen here, it's this top beam, when you have it at the right angle, is already at the surface of the water. I mean, we're shooting right at the surface of the water with this top beam. This back beam is right along this back edge. So all you do if you tilt that transducer up is you're trying to shoot the top beam through the water, which isn't going to work because we're not looking for birds, we're looking for fish. And you pull this back beam off the back. So really your sea bottom, your floor bottom, lake bottom is going to go uphill, and you're trying to rotate the whole image. So really it's important. You know, we've seen this a lot in some emails that have came in from customer service and just talking to people in, you know, forums and chat groups. It's very important to, when you're in forward mode, line those two lines up. When you're in down mode, line those two lines up. It's pretty easy. 2 clicks between the two, and we've got indicators right on there. Another question about transducer placement that we've gotten is if we could explain in a little better detail about scout mode on an electric steer. And again, back to those 2 mounts that we do, since we can't mount on the shaft of electric steer. For scout mode on an electric steer, we actually have this dedicated scout mode bracket in the box. And you mount to that, again, assume my forearm is the motor, and it sits on the motor like such with a hose clamp. So yeah, just get that bolted up just like that. The hose clamp goes through. Again, if you wanted to use the down view or the side view, or down view or forward view for the electric steer, it's this mount. For scout view, it's this mount. Unfortunately, with how we have to mount that on a motor, we couldn't use a big fancy arm like we are doing for the shaft mount, with all the different adjustments. I did have somebody ask, I saw in the chat asking about the different washers and assemblies and those kind of things. We do recommend those, put those in there. And then even when you install the scout mode bracket or the down bracket, so this is the bolt that comes with the down bracket. It's a shoulder bolt with a little washer. And this goes inside the back of the bracket. And then you actually tighten that to the transducer and then clamp that onto the motor. All right, Matthew, where are we at? Somebody asked, can you mount one of our network expansion ports and the ActiveTarget modules next to each other? Are there interference or heat issues? And no, there's no problem. You can put them side by side if you want. If you're loosening the knobs like we just showed, they easily fall in the lake. I'm going to show you how much we can loosen one of these before it actually comes out. So I don't know, can you see that on screen there, David? Is that good? I'm killing my camera guy. I'm making him run back and forth. So this is fully tight. That's loose enough to move the transducer. You can see it was like a quarter turn. This is how much I have to turn to take it out. So I'm going to go with probably not likely that you would loosen it enough to do that. But really, you don't need to loosen it that much. You just need to loosen it just enough, again, about a quarter of a turn where you can feel 2 clicks and tighten it back down. Yeah, so somebody asked if you've connected the red and yellow wire together because of the yellow wire turn-on issue that we have. Do you need to separate them later when the software fix comes? That's your choice. You could leave it connected the way it is and have it wired to a switch where you toggle it on and off. Or you could separate those and run the yellow wire to the MFD, to the HDS Live or the Elite FS, where they will turn the module on and off when they turn on. But that's really personal preference and how you want it wired. Can you mount 2 active targets, one in Scout, one in Forward on the same trolling motor? You can. They will interfere with each other a little bit, but it doesn't make it unusable. It just, you'll see some, I call them like lightning flashes, some pulses that shoot through the screen as they're pinging with each other. Yeah, so my moderator saved the best question for last. This is our last question in the queue, and it's a question about availability. When are we going to have these? When are we shipping? We've been shipping ever since we started production in December. Unfortunately, at this point, the demand has outpaced our capacity. So we've done a lot of things internally to grow that capacity, to try to catch up. But this has been unprecedented demand, and I can't tell you guys, I'd love to tell you guys how many of these that we have on order and how many we've sold. But let's just say it's a staggering number, and we've got teams working 24/7 to build as many as we can build every month to get them out to you guys. Yep. So I think that's the last question we've got for tonight. So I just wanted to say, again, thank you guys for joining us. I know it's a lot to ask for an hour of your time. I hope you got a lot out of this. If you have any questions or feedback, always feel free to email us. If you didn't get your question answered in the chat, I think we got most of them. But if not, feel free to shoot us an email or give our service group a call. But I do, again, want to thank you guys for joining us, and have a good night, and I very much appreciate it.